Yo, what's up guys and gals? It's JK Jax for another chess video. Today I'm going to be covering endgame fundamentals, alright? And most chess games will go into an endgame. So today I'm going to be teaching you how to actually convert winning positions into a win. We'll talk about priorities in chess. The priority is as follows. Number one, piece quality. In this position that you see here, white and black both have very strong rooks. This rook is super strong because it's cutting the king off of the 7th rank, preventing him from getting close to your pawns. However, the black rook over here is also pretty good because this rook threatens to take your c-pawn with check. And also this rook controls a little bit of the 6th rank, which is pretty useful for this white king to actually try to sneak past. It's going to be a tough one for the white king to do so. The next up is king activity. Why is king activity so important? You might think, Jack, isn't material more important than king activity? No. In reality, king activity is actually stronger than material. Why? Because the more active your king, the more likely your pawn is going to promote the queen. Yes, maybe 2 pawns against 1 has a higher chance of the pawn of becoming a queen, but to see the pawn becoming a queen, the king should be close to the pawn so that you have a red carpet. So for example, if the king was on h7, this pawn can easily become a queen because it cannot be taken. Well, there's a rook here, but they have to sacrifice itself, right? So in this position, you have to follow the checklist. You have to follow the priority checklist, okay? And the first one is piece quality, which already our pieces are quite good. So let's mark that off. Next is king activity. So now, king activity, number 2. How do you activate your king? You should identify the furthest pawn in your position. So in this position, you can see that g5 is the closest pawn to becoming a queen. Also, it is a passed pawn. There is no pawns on the f and g file. Although you can consider this an f pawn, but the problem is it's already advanced forward, making it some sort of a backwards pawn lah. So you have a passed pawn. It's an open file for you. Okay. So you need to move your king as close to the furthest pawn in your position as much as possible. That's just a guideline. Sometimes the furthest pawn in the position is not the best pawn to push to become a queen. Sometimes it's a passed pawn, a passed pawn that's from on a2 or something. But in this position, clearly you can see that this is the only pawn that can make progress. So you make that progress happen, make it a reality, right? So you play king to g3, and you might think, didn't you just hang a pawn? And now black is up a pawn? Well, yes, black might be up a pawn, but again, they can't make progress. This pawn is already becoming a queen. Meanwhile, all of these pawns are just slacking, they're not really close to the promotion square at all. So they give you a check, and again, I told you, apply the checklist, apply the priority checklist to be as close to the pawns as possible. So you play king h4. And now, opponent tries something like rook c2, trying to give you this rook h2 check and win a piece. Now, a lot of people will be like, can't I just push this pawn, slowly become a queen? Well, no. Because of rook h2 check. After king goes up, rook takes. They can exchange the rooks. And now, king g7. This pawn is lost. Neither side can make progress. And this position is a draw. Well, black can make progress, but the problem is the white king is actually closer to the pawns than the black king. So, therefore, it can't really make much progress. Also, the pawn on a4 kind of stops it from ever moving forward, so that's also another plus. So yeah, if you exchange the rooks in this position, it's actually worse for you because now both kings are active. Whereas in this position, the black king is less active than the white king. You should keep that advantage and not exchange it away. So what's the best move? Of course, just keep pushing up the king. Like, there's just king activity, remember? So just keep going for king activity, and if he gives a stupid check, you just go king g6, and if they try to exchange the rooks, Now you can see that the white king is more active than the black king because the white king is on the opponent's side of the board, okay, which is where all promotions happen. And this pawn also, it is creating a red carpet for the pawn to just easily, blitz through and become a queen. So after king h4, black might try to play rook to f3. What happens if rook to f3? Now, you don't want to play king h5 because if you play king h5, you lose another pawn and possibly a second pawn and a third pawn. So you don't want to do that. Okay, yes, although king activity is still more important, king activity doesn't mean anything if the pawn is eventually stoppable. So you gotta play g6. So now, this is considered making your king more active because this opens up the door for your king to actually get closer into the position. So if the opponent takes your pawn, you can just play king to g5. And if opponent keeps eating more pawns, now you get king to f6. And this position is completely lost for black. Even though black is up 3 pawns, there is mate incoming. It's not force mate, but there's a mate incoming. And this pawn is about to queen. Regardless of what you do, it's hard to stop. So something like king e8, you just play, you can push, but preferably not. Because if you push, now there's rook g4. So you would take the pawn. Okay, you would take the pawn, and then this is where you can push. So something like rook g4, trying to stop the pawn. You just play g7. And yeah, it's just a losing position. This pawn is gonna fall. And see, this is why king activity sometimes, or most of the times, is better than material. Because at the end of the day, a more active king is gonna pick up the material back anyway. So now we have this second endgame position that we have here. And of course, you can see that black is winning because black is about to promote this pawn into a queen. Now, why is it such a dangerous threat then? Black will promote into a queen and white trades the rook for the queen. But then at the end of the day, as you can see here, you can win this endgame with a rook up. And once the king goes down, you can just attack the pawn. And the point is that if the pawn moves anywhere, the A pawn is going to be lost. So, and if it doesn't move, the B pawn is going to be lost. And eventually the A pawn. Okay, so how it will look like is that if it pushes forward, you can just snag the pawn, and the B pawn will also be lost. So, knowing that this is black's threat, white plays rook to c1, prevents the pawn from pushing forward. So, in times like this where you apply the checklist, you have to promote the pawn into the queen or rook or whatever piece you need to do. Sorry for construction noises if there's any in the video, but stay with me now. If you can't make progress by pushing the pawn to promote into a queen or activating your king in any way, then you have to look for weak points in the position. As you can see here, there's a very weak pawn on b2 and a3. Black decides to attack the weakest pawn in the position, and white plays b4, trying to defend the pawn using the a pawn. However, this makes the a pawn very, very weak. Remember, backwards pawn. And now black attacks the backwards pawn. So now you can see that this pawn is undefendable, and white's rook is in the state that's called overloaded. What do I mean by overloaded? Overloaded means that one piece is doing way too much work and cannot handle this pressure. It can't do two things at once, right? And in this case, chess pieces are like normal human beings. They can't multitask very, very well. And you can't protect this pawn and prevent this pawn from promoting at the same time. You might think, Jack, can't you just go rook a1 and solve the problem? What happens if I promote? So if you take, I will take, and then this pawn is gone anyway. So you have to calculate 2 to 3 moves ahead. Don't forget that. So knowing this, white improves his rook, which is the best thing he could do. But then the pawn falls, and as you can see here, if you count the material, we are up a pawn. And this pawn is about to promote. White attacks the pawn. Okay, so now there are 2 attackers compared to 1 defender. What do? You protect the pawn. Simple as that. White pushes forward with the pawn, but I just go rook b2. What the hell does rook b2 do? There are two threats with rook b2. Number one, it is to play rook b1. Why is it so dangerous then? Rook b1 is a pin. The rook is pinned to the king by my rook. So how it will look like is that, if I just play some random move to show you guys, I can just play rook b1. The rook is pinned to the king and the rook cannot move anywhere. And if it captures the rook here, I get a queen. So you don't want to be doing that. Instead, white goes king g2 to step away from this dangerous pin. But what do I do is I just activate my king. So don't forget, apply the second checklist, activating your king, making it more active in this kind of positions. Pawn pushes forward, I just take the pawn and we trade. And as you can see here, at the end of the day, we are up a pawn. And this is a winning endgame for black. And of course, you continue activating your piece. White gives a blatant useless check. I can just go up, defend my f-pawn, and the pawn pushes down. So if the king goes to d6, you lose this pawn and lose one of these pawns, which is very bad. So, of course, opponent tries to create counterplay by pushing forward the h-pawn, but don't forget, attack weak pawns in the position. Attack the weakest point, remember. Pawn tries to push forward, but I just take the pawn for free. Look at that. Pawn gives a check, I just come here. Pawn gives a check, I just take, right? Everything is free right now. Rook, of course, takes my free pawn, but I'm going to win one pawn back anyway. And at the end of the day, you look at this, I'm up 3 pawns. It's a winning position, right? And the pawn pushes forward. Now, many people will think, ooh, my rook is under attack, time to move it away. But I'm built different, baby. I counter attack the rook on f7. That's what I did. And you might think, Jack, isn't this a form of simplifying the position as well? Yeah, you're absolutely correct. In endgames like these, the easiest way to win in every single endgame is to simplify and trade down pieces. We can trade each other's rooks, and as you can see, that this endgame is less complicated and is easier to win because white has no counterplay. What is 1 pawn and 1 king gonna do with 4 pawns and 1 king? This pawn isn't a trained MMA fighter. It can't do that, It can't 1-on-4 everybody. So unfortunately, this pawn is like a normal human being. It's like everyone else. It just can't. So, of course, that's the act of simplification. Instead, opponent moves away its rook to e7. I just keep chasing it like how I chase my girlfriend. I don't have any. Rook e8 and then rook f5. So I brought my rook to safety. King protects his weakest pawn, but I just give a check. And this is what we call deflection, is to kick away this king from the defense of the pawn. Doesn't really kick it fully, king still protects the pawn, but then I start harassing the rook again. Rook comes around, and then I start attacking. This game is over for white. As you can see here, this pawn is being pinned to the king, and there is no way to defend the pawn on f4. Rook d7, and of course white tries to attack my weakest pawn in the position. What do? First you take with check. If there's anything you can take for free with check, it's usually a good move, but you have to calculate, You can't just play mindlessly. You can't just snap trade all the damn time. King moves, and yeah, as you can see, this pawn is safe now because it's defended 2 times. And making your king more active, and of course my same goal applies. Promote these pawns into a queen and make my king as active as possible. And slowly but surely, we get ourselves a queen. Look at that, so nice. And white tries a last resort tactic, and that is to play rook takes e3. Now this is a very, very good move. It's probably the only move in the position anyway. But what does it do? Well, knowing that my queen is about to checkmate the king, he tries one last resort. and that is to sacrifice the rook. Take with the rook, okay? You don't snap trade, okay? Some of you here might actually take with the king and like stalemate your opponent. Don't do that. So you take with the rook, king goes to g2, and of course, slowly but surely, we made our opponent. So that's how you convert winning endgames into a win. So now guys, it's time to apply what you have learned. In this position, white played queen to c5, trying to simplify the position and make things better for himself. As black, what would you do in this position? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care everybody.